Welcome to the Stuart Heritage Museum monthly presentation. Before we bring Sandra up, I've got a couple little announcements to do. I want to, of course, recognize some of our esteemed guests. Beulah Clark, one of our Stuart Council. Barbara Osborne with the Preservation.
Well, Martin County Gen Society and Captain Sewell's house.
Yes. And many, many dear friends who have been a part of our museum for years, part of the community even longer. So I appreciate everyone turning out today. One of my responsibilities has been to honor Mary Jones. Mary had been the executive director for the museum for over 12 years. She and her family were an integral part of keeping the museum doors open when things were difficult. She can't be with us today. Her mobility is somewhat limited, but I wanted to recognize her and all the efforts that she and her whole family have provided to us over the years. Yes. And a plaque which will be delivered to her, and one will be displayed in the museum going forward. Good job. We've been blessed to have Sandy with us tonight. We had Phil Harvey with us last month. We're really trying to keep these on throughout the season. We've got speakers lined up pretty much through February. Next month we're going to have Thomas Glidden. He's a treasure hunter, both locally and around the state of Florida. I don't think we've got him convinced to bring in a gold doubloon as a giveaway, but we're working on it. We're working on it. You know, if I spread that rumor, I'll get a bigger turnout. We also have Winnie Thompson from the Port Salerno community, and along with several others from down there. We'd like to have a roundtable type discussion about the old times down in Port Salerno. Of course, Port Salerno is getting a lot of publicity these days over development, but that's not what we're here to talk about. And come February, we'll have Lloyd Jones as our presenter. Lloyd Jones is the current Preservationist of the Year. Between then and now, come December 2nd, Saturday, we'll be having an open house at the museum. We anticipate having music, refreshments, a raffle, tours of the museum, and we're anticipating having the trolley do some local community tour. We hope you all come out. There'll be refreshment. We're working with our usual donuts and coffee crew, along with perhaps some hors d'oeuvres from some of our local restaurants. So we're going to try and bump it up a little bit for you and make it interesting. Who? Who? Santa Claus. Don't let me forget that we've got Santa Claus coming this year. And we'll have trinkets or giveaways to the children and me. Just prior to our open house, the city has their Christmas parade on Friday, December 1st. So if you remember that, remember we're the next day. Anything else supposed to talk about? Maybe Sandy. I'm going to turn this over to Sandy in just a moment. And I know you all know Sandy much better than I do. But I did a little research, very little. She's a 5th generation Floridian, as I am. Wow. But you're not a local girl. Tom Butch brought you down from Gainesville. Tom was a local boy though, right? No.
The Yankee.
He's a Yankee. Well, you fixed him. Sandy's been involved in so much in the community. She's such an asset to the museum as far as history and what has happened. She's an asset to the whole community in that regard. And we thank you for all you give to us. But I think there's one part of your life that means more to me. It's not what you taught me or taught the folks out here, but the influence you've had on your own family, that they are all socially, environmentally conscious. And you pass that on, from you and Tom to the children, and I'm confident they will carry it on in many years to come. Take over from me.
Thank you, Gary. And it's so important that Stuart heritage that means so much to this community is still carrying on. And I told Gary that I did arrange for programs for years, and it was much more nerve-wracking to worry about someone presenting than I feel tonight, because I feel so comfortable with everyone. So thank you, Stuart Heritage, for inviting me, because I really haven't spoken to Stuart Heritage that many times. So and Marty Baum has already seen this program more or less, but of course I never say the same thing twice, so it'll be a little different. But Gloria attended a program that I gave to the Gin Society, and she said, "Sandy, would you give that for Stuart Heritage?" And I thought, well, boy, that's great. I don't have to do a whole lot of new work. But this subject is so important, and so it's things that I really think everybody in Stuart Heritage should at least be aware of. This is a map that Don Armstrong, who created Stuart Heritage, he drew one, and when I did my Stuart book, I put it inside. Chappie Young of the surveyor paid for it, because it was a very special thing to put it in the book over a map that had the present day Stuart on it. But I just want to see all of this. This is Ernest Stepman. He had to buy that, and he had 33 acres, and that's right where we are right now. And then when his brother, Otto, bought the rest that adjoined, and it goes all the way to Kruger Creek. So every place where the hospital is, where so many important things, is on their land. And the way it came about, and I have a cue later, this is the house of Otto Stipman, and it still stands. It's in the program later too. But it was originally named Potsdam, and people get a little confused that it didn't stay Potsdam after Flagler came. It was it was 1895 it became Stuart. So when we say it was Potsdam, remember it was long ago.
Where is that house?
I'll tell you, right next to this.
Oh.
So this is a map for the Florida East Coast, and you can see Potsdam is on it. This is probably just going to drive you crazy, Rick. I'm so sorry.
Right.
But see, we have Waveland, but we have Potsdam. So it was Potsdam long enough to be on the map. And it was because it was the Potsdam post office. This is Charles Stepman, and he is a descendant of Henry Stepman, who was the youngest boy. He was a boy and came with the Otto Stepmans. He was 7 years old when he came, so he was the first white kid here. And Charles started to become a genealogist after he was older and retired. And if you look in the history of Martin County, you will see a letter to him, and it was to Heidi's, her relative. I think it was to Myrtle Dyer. And there's quite a bit that he contributed to the history of Martin County. And because of him, I had things that I was able to get. And these will all go to our new process that we have, Martin Digital History. So all of this will be scanned so everybody will have it online if you happen to want it for some reason, or to just look at it. But these are the names of the Germans who founded our town, really. So you're probably all familiar with Kruger, because we have that beautiful house on East Ocean Boulevard with grass around it next to Kruger Creek. And it's so good. I don't know why I'm shaking. So, and then August Haars was also, but you'll hear more about him. But the Schroeder name is the nephew of the Stutmans, and he came here, and I'll tell you more about him. He appears a lot in the slides. Here are some things I got from David Stutman. He had things from his grandmother, and he sent them to me. And I connected with him because, it was years ago, before the, it was like 35 years ago. And it was before we had the internet or anything like that. And I was thinking, well, there's a way you can, well, I think you could get somebody on the telephone, by information. Remember, they would get them for you? And Stutman, it's the only name, Stutman, that has 2 N's on the end. There were only 3 in the United States. So I called one. It was David Stutman, who was the grandson who sent me all this stuff. He's an antique dealer. I hope he's still alive in New York City. But this is a picture of Ernest, and he was the one that was a surveyor, and he was on the survey boat, the Steadfast. And he was going down, and they came into the St. Lucie River, and this land was just a wilderness. And he saw this river and this beautiful land with its nice trees, and he thought, gosh, this is wonderful. I'm going to tell my brothers. He could not homestead because he had already homesteaded up near, it was called Duck Point, near Sebastian. So he couldn't homestead, and that's why he only had 33 acres? He had to buy his. And here's a map, and Todd knows this map has been on my wall, and I tried to give him a hard copy, and he just likes things in the computer. But this is an 1883 geodetic survey map, and the dates kind of match up, that I wonder if maybe the Steadfast was doing this surveying that resulted in this map. I like to think so. And this is Otto, and we don't have many pictures of these, and these are in the history of Martin County. And but that's the picture we have of Otto, and this is the picture we have of Mary, and both of these are in the history of Martin County. And Mary was an invalid. And this is the application for the post office for Potsdam. And you see down in the end, Barbara Osborne. Do you see who signs it?
Henry Sewell.
Captain Sewell did. Yes, he did. And I read it recently, I usually hardly remember to read these things again. And I think it says about 50 people would be using this post office. And one of the maybe you know who Frank Pittman, he was a longtime teacher at the Environmental Center. I know somebody in this room does, because Nancy, and well, good.
My kids had in there.
Yeah, so he was so wonderful, but he was an old-timer. And he said, he knew I was from Gainesville, you have to interview this woman. She's 100, and she has this beautiful handwriting. She makes all her clothes, and she lives in Gainesville with her kids. So that was just about my first interview I recorded. Her name was Fanny Baker. And as a young girl, she was fascinated with the Stutman graves. And they weren't there in Fern Hill. They were right there, kind of on the river behind the Lyric Theater, where Ernest Stutman lived. And they're very, very sad stories, and I probably will be talking about them in a different way than just looking at these tombstones. I have this in here because another wonderful thing happened. We got the grandson of Homer Hines Stewart, whose name is on our town, because we had Stuart Heritage Museum, he came into the Stuart Heritage Museum years and years ago, this grandson, and he dropped some things off. And at the time, I've never been on the board of Stuart Heritage or any. The people that really took the responsibility for Stuart Heritage always kind of alerted me when something came in. And Shirley Bland, who also worked out at the LA Museum, she said, would you like, they'd like me to make photocopies or with a camera, that kind of photocopy of some pictures that were given. And I said, my gosh, says it's Homer Stewart brought this in. And nobody put it together that it was our Stewart. And I contacted him, I got more things, we became good friends. And they didn't really give the letters to Stuart Heritage, but when Homer Hines Stewart Jr. lived here, he wrote letters to his fiance, and in this letter, here I'm really going astray, but he tells about the first child born here, and he said, poor baby, and her name was Aldwina Stedman, and she was a poor baby. I'll tell you the rest of the story, I think, as I go along. She ended up drowning in the river after her mother died in childbirth, and her big sister was watching her. And so she really was a poor baby. This is the best picture we have of Albert Stitman, and it just happened to be in a photocopies that Charles Stitman, the first guy I showed you, in his genealogy he compiled it, and it was in there. But that's all we have of Albert, and he homesteaded in Rio. But he went away and left his wife here, and this guy, who was our first lawyer here, and he's just completely in all documents, his name was Thomas de Steuben, and I don't know if the lady, Nan Jensen, I asked her to research to see if all the things he said about himself were true, and they weren't. But the lady, again, Clara de Steuben, came into the feed store, and because of that, and I was told, I got in contact with her, and I got this daguerreotype, is that what it is, from her, the copying it. And when my husband did the little book on lawyers, he was able to include the first lawyer, Thomas de Steuben, in it. Of course, he was very young in this picture. And this is an older picture of him, and he married a Stitman. Mary Stitman, the daughter of Albert Stitman and Jane Stitman, who lived in Rio on the other side. It wasn't called Rio then. And, but he was here, and his family was raised here. And Duke Merwin told me they were really smart. Duke Merwin was the one on Eden Lawn Plantation. But this is his business advertisement for Thomas de Steuben. Okay, this is Ernest, and I think I've already told you that he wanted his brothers to come here and homestead, and so that's how Albert and Otto got their homesteads here. And I have a little star of where the Germans were, and where Kurt is. We're the Moore Cemetery for the black community that's right there on the corner of Monterey and Canner. I mean, that was Kurt Schroeder's homestead. And if it says HS, that means it was a homestead. And then I've already told you where Otto and Ernest were. But then over here is where August Hars was, and Albert Q. Kruger. So I'll tell you more about August Hars. So what they did for a living, there wasn't much to do here. You can't send fish in a sailboat anywhere. So turtling was what they did. And they would get the turtles and they'd put them in a crawl, which is like a wooden cage or something underneath the dock, so you could save them, they could swim around, stay alive. And then when the sailing boat went up to Charleston or wherever, they would put the turtles on it, turn them over upside down, and put a little pillow under their head, and they'd stay alive, and that's the way they would ship them. So that was their industry. And August Harrs was one of the guys that would turtle with Ernest, and he got caught in his turtle net. And my daughter Jackie, who doesn't want anything to die, like an animal, she said had it coming to him, but he drowned in his turtle net, and he was like our first fatality of our county, and we were in Dade County at the time. And he was buried, first he was buried in St. Lucie Estates, and some of the people that like ghosts and things like that, they wanted me to tell them where he was buried, because they kind of had these vibrations. But he, I don't know exactly where he was buried there, but he was reinterred in All Saints Cemetery, and that's his stone, and it's a Woodman of the World stone, if you know anything about that. This is a very faint photograph, but you have to realize old photos are very old. And this shows Kruger. You could always tell who Rudolph Kruger is because he was always wearing a derby hat. They called him Dude. He always kind of had a stiff collar on and a derby hat. And in there, in the picture, is August Harrs, and then there's, no, it's Henry Harrs. After August died, he came to sell his estate. And it had Morris Johnson there too, I should have mentioned that. But this is one of the photographs the Krugers have, and it's of when Mr. Kruger went up to prove his land. He had proved that he had lived on it and improved it in order to get the deal that he had. And here, Ernest and Otto grew pineapples, and they shipped them by sailboat, which was not, ideal. And if you had other people's pineapples with them, they'd kind of get mixed up if the tilt, and there's a word for a tilted sailboat, they'd get mixed up. This photograph is really from the Florida Memory. Sometimes I have to stoop and get a generic one to make a point. But did that one say about him building? Yeah, it amazes me that our pioneers could build boats, just like it was easy. And this one was a 7.5-ton boat, and it was our first big boat that was built here. So there's another reason they're important. This photograph you've seen before, and when I showed it before, it was not of a good quality. And little Olga Hamilton from Siberia, who lives in the First Church, she is very good with photography, and she insisted to take it and improve it. And I think this is her improved version, maybe not, but I do have a print that was better than the one I showed her. It tells about how many acres were covered. They started covering the pineapples to keep the elements from damaging them, keeping the freezing away. And here is, they have a big talk. They love, when people take out guns and have arguments and get drunk. But that's the story that goes when Flagler wanted to go across Ernest Stitman's pineapple fields. Kurt Schroeder, his nephew, got a shotgun to say, "You dare come on this land, you guys." So they just went around and continued the rail on the other side. And then they got, I think they called him an Irishman, and he could drink liquor better than the Stitmans could, and Mr. Schroeder. And he got the price down, and they went across his property. And you notice how the train goes at an angle right across the Ernest Stitman's property. Here's the train that came through. It wasn't named Florida East Coast then. And now we have the little bright line going by. They would first, when the train came, they could ship the pineapples on the train. And this is one of our photographs. And if they are loading pineapples. still see the pilings of the freight station right in the water by the bridge. And then they had a way to ship the fish. They would ship carloads of fish, and that would require ice, so they had ice factories by then. This is the Potsdam, and see, this is why people get confused about Potsdam and, you know, how long it lasted and what was Potsdam. And then the Woodman of the World, Woodman Hall, had Potsdam 1914 on the front of it for years, so that confused people even more. But this is the Potsdam plat, and you see, well, here I put it there, 1897. That's a pretty early subdivision, and it was in Dade County then. Imagine that. This photograph at the Stuart at the Historical Society of Martin County, they were preparing for a hurricane, and they came across this album of old photos that had no information on it, and this was in the album. And you see, I have it on there that it was called, I call it the Cogswell album. And then a lady came into Stuart Heritage named Esther Hare, and she had this picture. And I don't know if you can tell that the boy is grown up, and he's the one on the right-hand side, but the woman, that's Amanda, and she was the one that was watching little Edwina when she drowned. She was the stepdaughter of Ernest Stedman. His wife, Frances, had been married before and brought this daughter into their family. And so she ended up living in the Okeechobee. And then Henry, the first boy that was here, he married Clara Bailey. And the Baileys came because the big freeze of '94, and the Baileys came. They lived in Putnam County, but they came here after the freeze, and he met their daughter and got married, and then Otto gave him some waterfront land. And I cannot be sure that this is the house, but it's in the family, it's in their collection. One of the Stedman descendants, Helena Beach, Helena Beach gave quite a few photographs to Stuart Heritage, and that's in there. Belongs to Stuart Heritage. Okay, here is where Ernest Stedman lived, and that's where those graves were. It was right on the waterfront behind where the Lyric was built. But then in later years, I think it was the Cataracts who built a house on the water, and they moved Ernest's former home over to the other side. You see where the arrow is? And it became an abstract agency, Mr. Kennedy's abstract agency. And here's is that the same, a different picture about it that was in the newspaper. Okay, we're getting close to Patty's friend Liz lives right near this in a little house that is called Lime Cottage. And one time we had it on a historic home tour. And I still have a sign in my garage that says, "This way to Potsdam," because I walked up and down the road and it told everybody. We weren't inside this building, but told them that was where the Potsdam post office was. And when we had Carl Kruger as a commissioner, it was decided that we should be a sister city to Potsdam. And I think I have, and these were taken quite a while back. It's on Riverside Drive, but this is the mayor of Potsdam who came and actually spent the night at our house. And Charlie Foster, who was the mayor of Stuart at the time. And then these are the people from Potsdam that came and visited, and I have many other pictures of them inside the Stuart Heritage Museum. And of course, our little museum, and if Potsdam is like this grand magnificent with brand buildings in here. We were showing them our little town. And we have someone, would you like to stand up, Linda, and tell them that you went to Potsdam on the exchange from here? Stand up, Linda Machado. So I didn't know she was coming, but I'm so glad she did. And I didn't have these pictures for the other program because I had lost them, but I found them. You want to say something?
Yeah, I was invited to meet the mayor of Potsdam, in Potsdam. And we were driven right up to the front, and it turned out that the mayor had an appointment with us at 3 p.m. and exactly at 3 p.m. the doors opened, we were ushered in. I was visiting a dear friend, and the dear friend, we were offered coffee. We only had 10 minutes. We were going to give them a key to Stuart and so forth and had a nice little chat with him. And he offered coffee to my friend. Oh yeah, ich muss coffee drinking. And so I'm trying to get her to finish her coffee. And we were ushered out after a few minutes, but it was quite an experience to be within the hall of the beautiful city. It really was a fun day.
It has a lot of water like we do, you know, it has a lot of waterways. And it kind of came about because we had people from Potsdam practicing rowing for the Olympics here in the South Fork. And it kind of happened. Okay, here I'm showing, this is Otto Stipman subdivided. He became a developer early on. And this shows that he gave that big piece of property, lot 10, to the city of Stuart. And there was even a memorial for a boy that was died in World War I in it. But when there needed to be a place for the hospital, Judge Canner was the city attorney. And somehow he must have said, I know where there's some land. And that's where Martin Memorial is, on that, given by Otto Stipman. So see why we need to know about him? And here's Otto. He was in the commercial club, and this was the forerunner of the Chamber of Commerce. And Kurt Schroeder, my family thinks it looks like Doug Smith. That's the way he looked when, no, here, did I already change it? He looked when he was young. And, but it's so amazing that he came here not speaking a word of English, and he came into New York City, and then he tried to work in a bookstore there, and he didn't like it, so then he decided to go join his uncles in the South. And he came in, and he wrote down everything that happened to him, his experience. Thomas de Steuben took him across, and then he came to that house I showed you that's on Riverside Drive, where the post office was, and he didn't know who was who, which was Uncle Otto, which was Uncle Ernest, and then he ended up, and he was heavy set, but it didn't take long for him, the pounds just to disappear as he was working in the pineapple fields and grubbing palmettos and that sort of thing, and he made boxes to ship pineapples in. And then everybody in this town is related to a Kitching, and even the Germans merged with the Kitchen family, and his wife was one of Sylvanus's Kitching's daughters. And he went up with, Stanley Kitching was already here. He became like Mr. Stewart. But he went up, they sailed up to Sebastian, where the Kitchings lived, and that was the post office, and they had all these kids. And that era shows Emma, and that's who became Mrs. Schroeder. And can you remember Mabel's Fancy, the big house? That was their house. So this was their first house, and later it became the house of the Johnsons, and before the, well, it was Wiley, Hall, I'm sorry. It was the Hall's house, and then this was Mrs. Hall, I think. And this is Mrs. Hall's mother, Mrs. Wiley.
And where's that?
It got knocked down, and it was a very big office well, a kind of medium-sized office building there. It was on Osceola. And this is Emily Kitching Schroeder. And this was their big house, and everybody in town would move out of their homes if they had a nice one when it was tourist season and stay in something little or the attic and rent it out, because, you know, a lot of people wanted to come down here just like they want to now. And this is Kurt. He didn't stay looking like Doug Smith. And he was, this picture is in the Masonic Hall. If you go in the Masonic Hall, which is just right there by, you know, like the Statue of Abundance, it's right there on Osceola, that they're just the portraits of all the big shots in town through history. And the reason I have those is because Alice and Greg Lockhart went in there and took a picture of each picture on the wall. There are just so many things we have because they took the initiative and did that. And Kurt Schroeder was so important. Yeah, I should ask my friend Charlene to read it. I always make her read things because I can't read anything well. But it would be that he did so many things. He was like the mayor. He was an alderman. He was a city manager and a tax assessor. And he died in '46, but right before that, he had written the whole history of the town in these long, long articles. And really, the history of Martin County is based on it. And every, Joe Crankshaw, the Lockharts, everything, you know, we use his material for everything. Because since he was an abstractor and helped with surveying and did all these things and was just so darn smart, he really recorded everything very well. And there he is with his daughter, Helena. And Helena was born in 1900, and these are her brothers. And we're using some of the pictures of the brothers hunting out in Palm City for our project now. But Helena married a very, you know, charismatic man that the marriage didn't last, but she had this one child, Emily. And Emily was the one that gave me the things that you're seeing now. I might, how are we doing time-wise? I should go faster. Okay, well, I'll keep battling. Because this is Eric Schroeder. It was the Kurt Schroeder's brother who came to Sewell's Point at first. And through his daughter, Margaret, who was born on Sewell's Point, I got some more stuff. And the reason I got all that stuff is because of my friends, the Christies. They knew everybody on Sewell's Point, and if I just used their name, they just melted and they would just cooperate and share. And so Margaret Schroeder, who lived in California, I never met her, she was like that because she had so many fond memories of the Christie family who were caretakers on Sewell's Point. But this is a picture that I have in Sewell's Point book because he was like a manager of a lot of things on Sewell's Point, and this pineapple packing house was kind of where the outrigger is. And here was writing about, he was in charge of the property that became the High Point Rod and Gun Club on Sewell's Point. We have many wonderful photographs that we're now putting online that came here through the Lockhart's connections, and there will be online for all of us. But I thought that was pretty cool with him on the horse there at, it's now Heritage Place. And there's the house it was on the river, and it was where Mr. Tyndall lived at first. But then when they built the High Point Run Gun Club, Sam Matthews rolled it to another place on the property, and that's where Margaret Patterson was born. And she was Schroeder then when she was born. And here was her dad. And not too long ago, they found this old survey map at the town hall and on Sewell's Point, and it had belonged to Mr. Schroeder. And it's really a great map. It was 1925, I believe. And it was really this house being demolished that got me hooked, and I started doing the history stuff. And that was, you could see it as you went over the bridge to Sewell's Point, and then they went, it was the haunted house. All the kids were going there, and they were gonna burn it to get rid of it, but they did dismantle it and use the wonderful wood. And some of the windows are even used on a house on Riverside Drive. What's amazing is Clara Stedman, who married the young boy, and I showed you the house and I wasn't sure if that was really their house, but they moved to West Palm because Otto Stedman had been in charge of elections and everything. He was like the kingpin of politics in our little town of maybe 50 people. And so his nephew was giving the award of being the tax collector in Palm Beach County. I think it was tax collector. And he became very ill. He died very young, but that's why they lived in West Palm. And here, she had to run his position. She had to do a lot of the work since he was so ill. But then she ran for school board in 1920. Do you know when women got the vote? 1920. I mean, isn't that quite remarkable? And not only did she become on the school board at the first election that had a woman in it, there were 2 women that ran in that at that time, not for school board. I think the other one was something else. But that's the other lady. So that was in the paper. And they've made a big deal out of that now that we're talking about women and successful things. But here she is, and now they're trying to preserve the old Stuart High School. And that's the cornerstone, and if you look at it, it says Chairman of the School Board, Clara Stedman. Now, isn't that wonderful? And and these are things that I got because I called that number and got David Stedman, and he just sent them to me. So I have them in a box, and I will give them to Georgian Carnes, who is scanning everything for the county. Let's see. Oh, so that tells about Claire and how her grandson got them, because she lived with him, and she lived till she was 96. And this is a connection. You might know Corky Hudson and the Seacoast Bank and all this. And the tie-in is that Emily Beach and Helena worked for the bank for their careers. But here, that's Helena. And you know how I bug everybody about, give me information, do you have any pictures? And she just I thought she really didn't like me because I bugged her and she was very low-key and quiet. But when she died, she gave me that table that had been in that house because she thought I would appreciate it. It's been in my foyer ever since. And she gave me all these papers and photographs that are now being scanned for our digital project. And things are always ongoing. Things keep coming. And I just wanted to share that story, but I have a little bit more. That's not the end. So when I gave this program in May, I believe, this guy was there, and he said that he was a McPherson. And of course, that is one of the pioneer names. And so he had a book that my neighbor across the street had given to his father, and his father moved away. He was the one, George McPherson, moved away, and he was in the military, and they lived all over. But he said, my dad just loved that book, and he brought it to show me that he had it now, and he has an apartment, even though he's a professor in California, he has an apartment locally now. And he said, my dad is the one in the sombrero. And you know how we've used this picture. Here we have Pam has, and I, she used it for an invitation. And then, besides that, I got so excited. This lady who came up and she said, I have ties with Stuart. And it dawned on me after she told me that her mother was May Axel, the daughter of Frank Coventry, who was killed, in a bar room in 1925, but who owned, and his parents owned Coventry apartment that had all been, that's the old Colorado Inn that Steve Attali has preserved so well. And this is the first time this photograph came to our area. It will all be turned over. I asked her if I could show them tonight. She lives in West Palm. But this is Mrs. Coventry and Mr. Coventry, and they came from Minnesota, and the little boy is Frank. And one of the things he did was ride the steamroller across the new bridge because nobody trusted it. And he got in and rode the steamroller over so people would realize it wouldn't fall down. And then he drove the getaway car for the Ashleys, but he was made to do that, evidently. He wasn't a part of the gang. And then Edith was a photographer. And now they are scanning hundreds of photographs that are at the Elliott. And then May Axtell, who was Frank's daughter, and gave me many photographs that I gave to Stuart Heritage. So they're being scanned. So it just goes on, and I hope I'm not boring you too much. But these were in, and her name is Mary Lee Reese, was the lady that gave me these pictures. She didn't really give them to me. She came to my house so I could quick scan them. And but this was her grandmother, Estelle, who married Frank Coventry. And this is the brother. They were Balls. And Balls is another thing like McPherson, an old, important pioneer. But their son, Wen, was killed in the line of service in 1913. And so he was a law enforcement officer who lost his life, and they've made a big deal. His name is on a monument in Washington, I believe, but they never had a picture of him, ever. And so he's young in this picture. He was like, that's a telegraph. He was a telegraph delivery boy. So, but those charming pictures just came just when I gave this program the last time. So thank you for bearing with me. And that's him. And this, I told Gary I would plug this Martin Digital History Project. The commission, Martin County is going to be 100 years old in 2025. And so the Martin County Commission, really Doug Smith, said, okay, we will try to hire someone to scan things so they can be like the Florida Memory Project. So this is one of the photographs that they just scanned, and I was looking at it, and look, here is a little train where the Bright Line goes now. When we were so mad about that happening, the city, Paul Nicoletti said, we're going to tell them we aren't going to let them go across our right-of-way. And I said, I'm sorry, but the right-of-way was, they let us go over the railroad track. It was there first. And so here is the Coventry apartment, and this is the first lyric theater. We had 3 lyrics. Alice Lockhart wrote a lot about that, and to have a picture of it right there. And then that's the view that our our videographer, our tech man, Rick Miller, who's done so much for us through the years. He looks out right in that direction from his office, right? So I hope you will just go on your computer and all you have to put is Martin Digital History and see what they're doing there. Here, I guess I didn't need to tell you all that.
Before y'all escape, Sandy, fabulous. You know, I don't know how, thank you. I don't know how she retains all that information. I can't remember where I was yesterday. And she even talked about people 100 years ago. Keep doing it. We need to hear it. We need to hear it over and over again because we want to be able to tell those stories 100 years from now. Have someone be able to tell those stories. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it 100 years from now, but I want someone to be able to.
There it will be a tour of All Saints Cemetery Friday, October 27th in the evening. And it's a fundraiser for All Saints Fence, which is falling down after 65 years. And it's $25 a person, and they want you to come in costume. So Bruce and I will be coming as Henry and Abby Sewell, and we're going to be at our graves, lying down on our graves. But
above the grave.
hopefully. It's Friday, October 27th, and I think I'm not sure the time, but is it 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
Okay, you're supposed to get tickets ahead of time, but I'm sure Joyce Fletcher will take cash at the door.
Cash always counts.
Yeah.
Would you like to plug the Stuart? Captain Henry.
It says, everybody's got one. It says it has all the information.
Okay.
Go to Tuckahoe Man first for tours, though.
Seemed like there was something else. Well, yeah, really. The only thing I have, other than that, you don't know, I'm an old Aycock Funeral Home employee. I'm associated, therefore, with Fernhill Memorial Gardens. And Saturday the 14th, this Saturday, 10 till 1 o'clock, they're going to do history tours of the cemetery, some of the old pioneer family interments. They share that with you. They'll have light refreshments and hayride type thing. So you're welcome to attend that.
What time is that?
10 till 1 o'clock
Where do
on
we
Saturday.
meet? Where do we meet? At the cemetery.
At Fernhill Memorial Gardens Cemetery on
Where?
Kenner Highway.
Where in the cemetery?
I would say go into where the office is and they will get you to the part. They're going to do a tour with a hay wagon or something. Folks, do appreciate everybody turning out. It's wonderful seeing this crowd. We are trying to grow our influence in the community, and we will be having things coming up in the future that will be asking for support in, not monetary support, but your vote. So pay attention to us. You don't know what's going to happen until we bring it up. Anyone tell me what I forgot?
You didn't forget. Sandy did. I had a connection to that. Frances Hunter, who married Ernest Stipman, was my aunt. So Alwina is my cousin.
Sandy forgot.
So did you know that Esther Hare is still alive? She came, I just interacted with her again. I thought she was gone. She's your cousin too then?
Yep.
Sandy, you started with Potsdam, but you didn't really talk about Homer Hines Stewart and the change of the name from Potsdam to Stuart.
I wandered quite a bit. Oh, sorry.
You want to tell us?
I have a Kruger here and I just glossed over him
Yeah.
and kind of stumbled, sorry.
Thanks, folks, thanks for turning out.
Thank you.